About 6 months ago, I made a video on the top 5 speedruns to watch to get into speedrunning, and it got pretty popular. One of the suggestions I received on there was to make a video on how to start speedrunning yourself, and I thought that was a good idea. Maybe you've been watching speedruns for a while now and thought, I could do that, or at the very least, that looks fun, I want to try that out myself. But you might quickly realize that to get to the level of some of the highest tiered runners, it takes unparalleled practice and dedication. And that's definitely true. A lot of these runners have sunk hundreds of hours, thousands of attempts into their speed games, and practice does make perfect in this case. However, you may have no idea where to even start, so that's what we'll look at today. I think it's important to note that I am in no way an expert on speedrunning. Sure, I've dabbled in some speed games, Donkey Kong Country and 140 seriously, Super Meat Boy and DKC2 casually, just to name a few, but this will definitely be my personal opinions and experiences on how to get into speedrunning, so just understand that. Anyway, let's get started. The first step is actually one of the hardest, finding the right game to speedrun. Perhaps you've watched multiple runs of games that you might want to try out, but doing the speedrun itself might be harder than you anticipated. I'd recommend choosing a game that you enjoy playing normally. Otherwise, it's easy to get frustrated and end up hating a game over time. Remember, you're going to be playing this game a lot, over and over again, resetting often. If you don't like the game in the first place, speedrunning it won't be an enjoyable experience for you. This might be a game that you cherish from your childhood, but keep in mind that this won't always be the case. I love Paper Mario. It's one of my all-time favorite games, but I don't have any interest in speedrunning it because it's really long, it's full of frame-perfect maneuvers, and there's a lot of RNG, or random number generation, involved in the final boss fight. You might have the perfect run and get some bad luck on Bowser and have it all be for nothing. That doesn't mean Paper Mario can't be a fun speed game for anyone, I just know that it isn't for me, even though I love the game casually. Length of a speed game is important to consider too. How long are you willing to sit and play through a game for? Personally, I enjoy shorter speedruns more because I don't have to commit an extended period of time to attempt my run. Some people are fine being in it for the long haul, taking multiple hours to complete a run. Just be sure to eat and go to the bathroom beforehand. Either one is fine, it's just critical to understand what you would prefer, and pick a speed game that coincides with your feelings on that. I enjoy running Donkey Kong Country because it's not too long of a run, normally around 45 minutes. There aren't a lot of intensive tricks involved, and there's almost zero RNG. It's a good game to get your feet wet into speedrunning if you like platformers. I'll be referring to this game a few times since it's one that I know pretty well. Once you've found a game that you want to run, it's also crucial to find a good timer program. I've tried out a few of them, but I can easily recommend LiveSplit to you. It's easy to use, free, and does everything you'll need it to. I'll put a link in the description for you. Before you just dive in and start timing, however, you need to understand what the different pieces of your timer mean. The big counter here is your overall time spent in a speedrun, pretty obvious, but these numbers up here are called splits. You can set the timer to keep track of how long it took you for specific sections of the game, so it's easier to understand your progress as you're playing. In the case of Donkey Kong, I have it split after every boss fight, so that I get an idea of how things are going at the end of every world. A red split means that you're behind your best time, you didn't do too hot this run. A green split means that you're ahead of your previous time. But a gold split means that not only are you ahead, but you did the best you've ever done on that section before. You can also set the timer to show you more info, like the exact time gained or lost in a section, or even show it in a graph. It's extremely customizable, and you can even add pictures if you want. Once you're ready to go, it's vital to watch some speedruns of your game first, to get an idea of what sort of skips or speed strats you'll be doing. If your game is at least somewhat popular, I can almost guarantee you that there's a speedrun of it out there somewhere. Just type your game name and speedrun in YouTube and see what comes up. Even better is if you can find a run that has commentary on what the player is doing. Speedrunning events like Awesome Games Done Quick are great for this, as there's almost always someone explaining what's going on while the run is happening. Take notes. Like, literally, have a sheet of notes so that when you're running the game yourself, you can quickly reference it for what to do next. Just try to learn the easy, big skips first. Likely, your speed game will have some really crazy, hard to pull off stunts in it, but you don't want to get overwhelmed or frustrated before you even really get started. Focus on huge time savers that don't use too much skill to execute in the beginning. For Donkey Kong Country, a good example of these are the level warps put into the game. These are meant for the player to find, so they're extremely easy to do. You just walk or jump into them, and they can easily save several minutes on a run, as it'll just skip the whole level for you. Any little maneuvers that are used often are also good to take note of. Diddy moves much faster than Donkey Kong, so you should almost always have him out. Not to mention that Diddy can gain a lot of speed if you cartwheel through enemies. Little time savers like these are great to work on from the get-go. Whenever possible, I would recommend practicing your speed game with save states. This way you can retry quickly when you miss a certain move or skip, but save states definitely aren't available for every game. Either way, it's always a good idea to find out important strategies and practice them a few times before actually doing a full run of your game. Once you have an idea of how your speedrun will look, it's time to record what's called your first splits. Now, this is very important. Don't worry about getting a bad time here. Don't get upset when you die a lot. This is just setting the starting line for your improvements. The time for fixing mistakes and shaving off frames will come later, but don't get discouraged if your first splits are bad. In fact, almost certainly these will be easily beatable, so I would recommend doing a few more runs just to get the hang of your speedrun and strategies. It's really easy to fall into the trap of resetting a run when you make one silly mistake. Don't do this. You'll often make up the time lost over the course of your run, or at the very least can practice the later parts of the game if you keep going. You'll find that you reset the game a lot and will get really used to the first few levels. It'll become muscle memory for you. This is why it's important to practice the end of your game just as much to balance out your skill as a whole. Finally, once you know what you're doing after a few runs, it's time to fine-tune. This is the point where you learn more advanced tricks. Remember that really hard move that only had a few frames to get right? Now you need to try it yourself. It's essential to not form habits around wrong strategies. Meaning, maybe when you started studying your game, you learned an easy version of how to do a certain part. But as you improve and work on lowering your time, you don't want to make it the norm to do the easy strategy. Work on doing the best time-saving moves now. This is where the big hard skips will come in. When possible, consult wikis, guides, or forums for help on how to perfect these maneuvers. You might not be able to execute them first try in an actual run, but you will eventually, and it'll feel awesome when you do. Start shaving seconds off in just your overall speed. In addition to pulling off glitches and tricks, you need to just move faster too. You'd be surprised how much time can be saved just by not slowing down. Memorize level layouts, make sure you know what's coming next. Do individual level or IL runs. Practice the levels that give you a really hard time to make sure you don't screw up on them in an actual run. As I said in the beginning, practice really does make perfect once you know what you're doing. The final step is to just keep plugging away at it until you get to the point where you're only saving 30, 15, 5 seconds on a run, and it being a huge victory. It can be extremely rewarding, but you have to put in the effort to get to that point. If you stick it out, you might be surprised how talented you've become. I hope these tips and tricks helped in your journey to start speedrunning. If you have no idea what game you might want to run, I would highly recommend checking out AGDQ this year. It's a massive speedrunning marathon from January 3 through 10, where they raise money for charity. No doubt you'll have some fun watching and hopefully get an idea of a game that you might want to try your hand at. Maybe someday you'll become the player on the couch, giving advice to an audience of thousands of people. Well, maybe. But speedrunning is absolutely a blast to do, whether you're doing it seriously or just trying to get a personal best, and I can't recommend it enough if you're thinking about giving it a go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Hey guys, I'm Snowman. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing for more stuff just like this. Tell me in the comments about a game that you've speedrun or have thought about speedrunning. I would love to hear about it or give any advice if you'd like to ask. Check out these other videos before you go. On the left is my top 5 speedruns to watch video I mentioned earlier, and on the right is a series I do called Good Game Design, where we analyze principles of what makes games great. Finally, please follow me on Twitter for updates on future videos and really bad jokes. Thanks again, and I'm out of here. Bye-bye.